Today is going to be a really exciting day. It's going to finally be the first start of the Hellcat Magnum. And I know you guys have all been waiting for this moment, and so have I. So I've been waiting to do a bunch of stuff, as well as I've been trying to get transmission cooler lines made. I finally reached out to Fragola, and they sent me these beautiful gems right here. So if you're interested in having any lines made, there's a link in the description to Fragola's website. I didn't expect these lines to come this good and look this good, and I was bouncing back and forth trying to get transmission cooler lines made for a very long time, and I was trying to find fittings. I wanted them to be crimped, and it was just really difficult. And I reached out to Fragola, I told them which ends I wanted, how long the line needed to be, and then I opened the box and I got these, and I was like, oh man, these things are gonna be awesome. So the reason I went with these instead of the factory line is on the Durango, the transmission cooler goes into the passenger side of the transmission cooler on the radiator, and on the Charger and Challenger, it's on the driver's side. But not just that, on the transmission cooler lines, there is a thermostat. And this is why Hellcat transmissions blow up. So this thermostat doesn't allow enough fluid to get to the cooler, maintain a stable temperature. So if you go to the track, your transmission temperatures just continue to climb and climb. If you look at your transmission temps on the display and you continue to run, you can hit like 275 or 300 degree transmission temps. And people wonder why these transmissions blow up, and then they go get a built transmission. Just delete the thermostat. Your transmission temp should stay around 150 to 175. So the next thing I need to install is the dual fuel pump fuel hanger, block off the feed and return ports, because I'm going to be using the factory feed and returnless system, because you can use this up to 1,000 horsepower and not really have any issues. And then I don't have to run a bunch of aftermarket lines for the time being, since my aftermarket fuel rails I have designed are not ready. So what I need to do first is put some oil on these fittings, these O-rings. Want you to attach these is just crimp on pins and cut these wires. What I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder the wires and then solder these wires to the board, which makes a lot more sense. You can see that it's nice and soldered on instead of having butt connectors, because there's just too much that could happen with butt connectors in a fuel tank, and I didn't want to have any issues. And this is just a lot cleaner, because then you don't have a bunch of things that clip into each other. All the stuff on the top, you can see it's separate like this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put it on a plug. These two are already on a plug. I might leave them on these connectors, but I may end up just putting them into a factory connector, because the Durango Hellcat had 2 fuel pumps and it could power both of those pumps with no issues. I now have oil in the Hellcat Magnum, and I've never actually put any oil in this car with my aftermarket oil pan that I made to fit around the all-wheel drive system. I tried to add a little bit more capacity. I added a lot more capacity. So instead of 6 quarts, this bad girl now takes 12 quarts of oil. So it's pretty much a Viper, and we have oil. So that's a plus. It's on the dipstick. We're at the correct level. The wiring is now all 100% connected. There are a few connectors that I need to pin out because the wires were too long. So this is the center console plug going to a Challenger center console harness. I will relume this, but a lot of these wires are too long, so I need to get the correct pins so I can finish pinning this plug out. Same thing with the center display. A lot of those wires were way too long, so I need to get pins for that. And then over here, all these amp wires coming from the rear amp, it needs to be pinned out so it could go through a connector. And then over on that side, but everything is now connected. Another thing I need to get pins for is the transfer case control module, because all this wiring is like probably 6 feet too long. It's gonna go out the tranny tunnel right there, and then that will be all tidied up with this harness this is all airbag harness, but everything else will be tidied up once I get those pins. But it's good enough to start right now. I really like how the harness came out. It's still de-loomed, so everything's just zip tied and tied up, but it is really nice. This is another speaker wire that goes up here because there's 3 speakers in the dash. You can tell how many speakers there are. There's 19 speakers in this whole assembly. It's hooked up to the charger. Should be about 30 minutes and she'll be fully charged. Battery just finished charging. We're at 13.1 volts. I think it's plenty enough to fire her up for the very first time. Figured out why I don't have power, and it was actually a pretty simple thing. So on these fuse boxes, you would think this stud right here by itself would have power going to it, but it's just the base. So I just had the thing kind of in here, and now I just need to tighten this down all the way. So I have power to the fuse box, and that kind of makes sense why we didn't have any electricity going to anything. I was like, oh man, what is going on here? So let's actually tighten it down. I mean, I should be able to. Oh man, what's really going on? I don't see anything on the display though. We have no information. It's off. Maybe it's because the key's not in here. I need to figure out where the key's at. I think this is the right key. I mean, the battery's probably dead though. I have no clue at this point. Off. The shifter is on, but why don't we have anything going through any of the screens? Gauge cluster just came on, and I haven't seen it on for a while, but for some reason the 4-way flashers are wigging out. The button's pressed. This center stack came out of a wrecked Challenger. I wonder. Oh, they work. Oh, so I was very unsure about that center stack. That's, you know, I'm trying a bunch of different things. So this is a Challenger center stack, which is totally different than the Durango Hellcat center stack. The Durango one has a bunch of buttons on it, but this one still has the launch mode and the SRT mode, so I thought it'd be okay. Are we in accessory? No, we're on off. I think it's not seeing the key. Looking around, scratching my head, trying to figure out why it's acting like the RF hub isn't seeing the key. So I look around, I'm like, well, all the grounds are connected, all the powers are connected, all of the sensors for the RF hub are connected, and it's giving me that press brake pedal like it doesn't have a VIN number. So I come in here, I'm like, are all the powers up here connected? Yeah, what's going on there? And I'm like, what are these wires right here? Oh man, it probably would help to have the ECU ground. climate control's doing something. It's actually moving the vents. Okay. We still got 4-way flashers. Let's see if we have accessory. No accessory. I got the display to turn on. You know, if you power up the display, the screen probably works. Important. Always obey traffic laws. Except GPS UKNX box requires service. GPS related functions are disabled. Please, well, there's no antenna connected, so okay. UKNX blah blah blah. SOS, and yeah, the mirror's not in there. I understand. Oh man, is this? There's no what? It's keyed on. It says it's off. I'm very confused what's going on right now. The gauge cluster isn't illuminated, but for some reason we have power. Oh, nope, whoop, oop! I touched something. Okay, try this again. Okay, well, maybe this is just not telling me what's going on. Only found one popped fuse in the fuse panel, and it was for the electronic LSD. Makes sense because the wires were torn from the accident, but I just pulled the one from the horn because Dodge decided to use this weird fuse compared to everything else they use on Hellcats. So I don't think this is anything in here was the issue. I'm gonna go check to see if the ABS module actually has power going to it. I went and power probed all of the main important pins on the ABS pump module because I didn't have any brake lights. On Dodge and Chrysler products, if you don't have brake lights, your car isn't going to start because it's not going to send the signal. It's not going to energize anything because the ABS pump module pretty much controls a lot of the starting procedure. So now I finally got brake lights. As you can see, they're constantly on, but the reason they're constantly on is because I have the sensor off of the brake pedal. So look at that. We have brake lights. Still not keying on. Did fix a problem though. Right. I now have the transmission cooler lines installed. What I'm gonna need to do is find something that will hold this up. So there is a thing on the frame rail, a little hole that I could right here. And I wanted to tie this up like so. So then these come out and they're away from the exhaust and they're away from the drive shaft. But I'm gonna have to heat wrap them because they're still pretty close to the exhaust. I just don't wanna have any issues down the road where these get too hot. Another thing is I wanna put a bracket up here so these come out straight like that. Like OEM. Look at that. We got oil cooler lines. It means we can start the car. This harness is a little bit too long, but I'll shorten her once I get the pins. This harness is definitely gonna have to be adjusted lengthwise. It's way too long for what it is. I don't know why Dodge did it like that. Having a few issues getting the charger to key on and then go into the run position. So I can't get it to go into the accessory and I can't get it to go into run or start. One thing I did do because I wanted to see how many modules I could take out of the system while it will still be able to key on. Another thing I did find out while doing this is Dodge made it so all of the gauge clusters and all the center stacks and all the shifters and all that stuff auto configures, which is really awesome. Also wanted to see how many plugs I could pull out of the BCM where it still keys on. So all you need is the two top plugs, the black plug, the large black plug, and that blue plug that goes into the dash, and then it will key on. So I'll throw this gauge cluster in and then I'll put that one back on, but I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Do the charger gauge cluster in here, and as you can see, it shows me how many miles used to be on, I believe this is the one out of the Hellcat Magnum, but it auto configures it. It's awesome. And then you go there and everything works. It auto configures it. It's crazy how Dodge does that. I'm very impressed with Dodge because of this, because you can throw any gauge cluster in a car and it's gonna work because they're all the same plug. Same thing with the shifter. So you can see it's flashing because we don't have the transmission connected, but the shifter throughout all of Dodge line, all the newer stuff, they all work. They all have the same plug. They all have all the same wiring into the CAN bus system, and then also the center stacks, all same plug, all the same wiring. So you could flip-flop stuff around. Then your climate controls work. all of this stuff works, which is a plus because it's all controlled by, via CAN bus, which is really cool. So let's throw the gauge cluster from the Durango back in there so I can show you what's going on. I decided to throw a Hellcat Challenger cluster that I had laying around in here. Man, I almost want to go to this instead of that cluster. I don't know. Now I have some decisions to be made. Let's plug this cluster in, and maybe you guys are gonna have to let me know. I really like the red faces. I just really like how these clusters look. See, I don't know, these clusters look cool too. They just, I don't know, they're not as cool. It is cool, but it's just not as cool. I have some decisions to make about that cluster or the Durango Hellcat cluster. Now the great thing is that I know that all I have to do, I know these two plugs are good to go, and I'm pretty sure that these two plugs are good to go, but for some reason it's not letting me key on. So something is causing that. I don't know if that's a CAN bus issue, but another thing I did not put in was there's like a module next to the gateway module, but it's for like wireless, I think it's wireless internet. I left that out, but it had wires going from the gateway module, which is this one right here, to it. So I just wanted to make sure that if this wasn't in, we'd still be able to key on. And if I had all this, because I wasn't 100% sure on the shifter or the center stack, but I was like 97% sure that they would work. But now I know that they will work. So, and I really want to put that gauge cluster in. I might end up putting that like a red eye cluster in the Hellcat Magnum instead of the Durango cluster. And then we'll have Challenger center stack and center console, Challenger shifter, probably a Challenger red eye gauge cluster. After a whole day of diagnosing this wiring issue, I finally, hopefully, have gotten this. I plugged the battery in, I plugged all the components back in, what was going on, and I thought it was a CAN bus issue. And then when I scanned it, it showed that I wasn't communicating to anything except for the gateway module, which is right there. I took the dash support out because I want to pull all this out and clean all this because it got really dusty. So I'm going to do that, then I can hook up the AC lines. But I wanted to be able to get the harness and work on it really easily. So since that gateway module worked, the gateway module is on the white star connector, and everything else, the gauge cluster, the shifter, as well as the center stack and all that stuff is on the green connectors. So the green connectors, star connectors, are in series, and there wasn't a wire going into the body control module. So there's no way for it to communicate to the body control module, and that made a lot of sense because when I was pressing the unlock and lock button, it wasn't doing anything. So I haven't tried it yet. I'm very afraid because I've spent a whole day diagnosing this and trying to figure it out. Oh, it works! No way! Oh, we got security? Unlock? Is this gonna work? Oh, I'm scared now. Oh, it works in the car! It's showing that we have a transmission error. Just because, I'm hoping that's just because I don't have the ECU plugged in on the bottom plug or on the top plug right now. Oh, this is awesome. We have, this is so cool. Oh, it goes in a run. This is awesome. So this means she should start. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to connect the ECU plug as well as connect the fuel pump up, and she should fire up. All the AC lines are in, all the coolant hoses are connected to overflow. Everything looks super factory. Everything fits really nice. The one thing I want to do eventually is tie these transmission cooler lines up, and I'm probably going to have to end up doing that before I take it on like a real first drive, because I don't want to have any issues with anything rubbing through the transmission cooler lines, because that would be a catastrophe. So yeah, I'm really happy. It all looks super factory. Looks like it is almost untouched. If you weren't, like if these were black and once this is all tied up, you really wouldn't even know what you're looking at, which is exactly what I wanted. So let's put the intake back on. I actually cleaned all this up while I had it off, and then we could get all the headlight and everything back on, because you have to have the intake off to, or have the headlight out to pull the intake. But yeah, this is looking super clean. I'm really happy all these AC lines that I made worked out, because that's a plus, because I want to have air conditioning in this thing. And I really love the Fragola transmission cooler lines. I just need to figure out how to tie those up a little bit better by the exhaust and the drive shaft in the back. I think everywhere else is pretty decent, but I do want to probably get some clamps. Let's see if the fuel pump turns on. I'm using all this stuff. It's not the best stuff, so I need to make a fuel pump harness. But for right now, it should power up the fuel pump and prime it so she can start for the first time, which is kind of what I'm hoping. Can't tell. Oh! I hear some fuel pressure. Woo! Ah! Come on, baby. Ooh, I hear it. Hell yeah! Ah! It starts! Yes! Oh, and the park is good now! Yes! Super excited, and I'm sure you guys are as well. The Hellcat Magnum, she finally runs, and technically she would drive as well, but I need to have her aligned. So I have an appointment set up. I believe it's 2 to 3 weeks from now. Closest appointment I could get, and I have it set up at the Dodge dealership. I also am going to have the AC charge and a bunch of other stuff done while I'm there, but I'm very happy that I'm to this milestone because it has been a ton of work to get here, just in wiring to get everything to talk to each other perfectly and flawlessly. I can't believe that modules with Dodge work so flawlessly together. So I'm gonna have to give big props to the engineers that designed the modules at Dodge. You guys are doing a great job. Most companies, if you plug in a different gauge cluster into a different car, it either locks the car out or the cluster isn't gonna work. I can plug any Dodge cluster from 15 up into any vehicle, and it's gonna work through the CAN bus network. It auto configures. I'm very surprised about that. The center stacks are the same, also the shifters, and I am really happy that a subscriber reached out. I was trying to get somebody to come down and program the brake pedal position. He reached out. He owns a key programming company. I'm just really happy that he came down here and got that all set up because it was stopping the car from restarting. I was able to get the car to remote start once, and then after that it was locked out. Then I noticed it didn't have brakes. Luckily enough, he came down, he busted that out, and now it remote starts. It also starts with a stop start button. It turns off. Everything works really well, and I'm very happy about that. What I was trying to achieve with the build was the car to be as stock looking as possible, but still incorporate everything from the Durango Hellcat while still functionally being able to appear as a Charger, and everything on the Charger side talking nicely with the Durango Hellcat stuff. And I'm very surprised, and I don't think it would have worked as well if the Dodge engineers didn't make it work as well and make everything kind of communicate together. I mean, they could have made it a lot harder, and I'm sure after I post this video they are, because it is it's very easy. But I'm very happy that even with the HVAC stuff, I wired in the Charger HVAC module because the Durango Hellcat and the Trackhawk, they have front and rear AC and heat, and the Charger doesn't have that. And I didn't want to have a bunch of just random wiring laying around. Plus, there's like 17 blenders or blendors in the Durango Hellcat, I believe in the Durango Hellcat and the Trackhawk HVAC system, and I didn't have room for all that wiring, and I didn't really need it. I wired everything in from the Charger. It works flawlessly, and I can't wait to have AC in the summer as well as heat in the winter, because I think I'm going to be driving the car in the probably next couple weeks, which is going to be awesome. I cannot wait. There's a few things in the next video that I need to button up. I need to bleed the brakes. I need to bleed the transmission. I need to put coolant in the engine and bleed the cooling system. Then I can finally let the engine warm up and get to operating temperature. I also need to get the exhaust done. And there's a few other things that I want to bust out. And I'm going to start throwing some interior in the car as well, because we're kind of to that point now that the wiring is finished. And I'm really happy that it's finally coming to the point where I'm this close to being able to cruise the car around, and just in time for spring. I'm really happy about this because I'm going to be able to make a bunch of events in the car, and I cannot wait. Another thing that I need to do is I need to re-drill the front hubs to 5x115. I was kind of in between staying 5x127 or going back to 5x115. I think I'm going to go back to 5x115 just because there's a lot more options for wheels on 5x115 for a Charger, instead of trying to find SUV wheels that even look good on the car. I can't wait till the next video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, throw a thumbs up, throw a comment below, share it with your friends. As always, see you guys next time.